Okay, अब होता क्या है? What actually goes into implementing SAP HCM is that the client has to understand the landscape before actually going into venturing into SAP HCM implementation. So companies will actually sit down and they would assess and navigate through the landscape, the current landscape. Okay. Internally, they would collect all the client info and they will connect all the processes and collect all the processes. Okay. And they would also decide with the management, with the decision makers, with the key roles or the key personnel or the heads of the departments for the phases, and they will finalize that. So it's a very long process. It takes many months and sometimes years to collect all this, and they, as a client, will actually interview everyone involved, top uh, top to down, and they will involve everyone to understand the landscape. For example, if Ford as a company wants to go into implementation for SAP, it will first assess and see how many users we need, how big is our organization, and how will SAP benefit us. And for that, they will need scoping. Scoping is basically understanding the total running landscape of the processes of every department. So that is a huge mega operation and assignment that has to be done, and that comes in the form of documentation, user management. Okay. For example, if finance has to go into implementation of SAP, they will have to assess what is our financial process, how many GLs are being involved. For HR, it will be number of employees, the taxes, the unpaid leaves, the process of hiring, the process of payroll management, training, and so on. And similarly, every department like material management or warehouse management, they will be concerned about inventory groups, material groups, storage locations, and so on. Then comes, once the scope is clear, although it's not 100% perfect or not 100% clear as well, but the groundwork actually has to start, and that starts with the scoping. Then comes in the phase two. The teams for audit, finance, and other departments, they take up the responsibility to check what process is basically important and which is not, and that is then documented, and a project director heads this entire operation of process identification. And then comes the implementation, where the client will then finalize the documentation, collect the documents, and it will invite companies, the consulting companies, to give demos. Okay. And the demos are then arranged by companies which are big companies, of course. Okay. And they would actually show a plan how these modules will be implemented. They also share the profiles of experts, of the change management people, and the project directors that would lead the project. And companies are also concerned about high cost, low cost, but big companies, multinationals, they actually are focusing on deliverable, not cost. Okay. If the problems are too high and too painful, then of course they would only focus on deliverable. And deliverable set is, of course, what is that value product, how processes are smooth and automated. That will be, of course, the focus. Quality, of course, comes with a high price tag. For example, if a company wins the project, it gets to understand the project first. Okay. And speaking of HCM, of course, they would actually sit down and see how many users will be needed, what modules of SAP will be needed. Speaking of HR, of course, they will have segmentation for training manager, recruiting manager, payroll, work schedule, taxation managers separately. Okay. And that will actually bring to a point where processes for every department process will then be discussed and finalized. Okay, so some companies, of course, they do not actually want to get into big implementations, including SAP sometimes, because they have a comfort level and they don't want to disturb their running processes. Okay, and SAP licenses are basically integrated with other modules. So these licenses will also necessitate whether the company can actually move and shift or not. Third is basically hiring of consultants, whether they can afford or they can make available consultants for their processes. So based on this, some implementations actually do not go forward, which also includes HCM. So system landscape is very very fundamental to SAP implementation. In a system landscape, broadly speaking, there are like three servers or three landscapes or three clients: development client, quality client, and production client. Okay, these servers are set up by basis consultants. Okay, so in three categories, we can actually break it down into organizational hierarchy. But before that, in development, of course, we have configuration, development, testing, customization. In that landscape, of course, we actually go ahead and check whether the processes are being managed as they want. Okay, so
sorry to cut you down. Can you like